Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. Glad you could be here. Um, as usual, I will be responding to questions that I have received ahead of time from my patrons and channel members. So if you're with us live in the chat right now and you have a question or a comment or something you want to talk to me about or see me respond to or whatever, please hold all of that stuff if you possibly can until we get to the end of the patron and member questions, and then I'll turn my full attention to the live chat. But before we get to the patron questions, I do want to acknowledge that for those of you who watch me with Dana on Trek Reluctantly, or also Read Away, and the other videos that Dana and I have done together on this channel. Dana right now is preparing for the first performance of her play. You may have heard her mention over the last couple of weeks. She is starring in a local production down there in North Georgia, where she lives, of A Little Princess, and she is playing Miss Minchin. And her call time at the theater was 6, so she's like there at the theater getting ready right now. And showtime, it's curtain up at 7:30. So her first show is tonight. I just checked the website, and apparently the first performance is sold out, which is awesome. And so she will be doing that tonight and tomorrow and Sunday as well. So even though she can't be here with us in the live chat, hopefully those of you who know her and have seen her on my show, will send her some good thoughts and be thinking about her. And I know I am, and we'll wish Dana good luck, and the rest of the company good luck for the performance tonight. So just wanted to put that out there out front. Good luck, Dana, for the first performance of A Little Princess tonight. And I know it's going to be fantastic. Break a leg. So now then, let us turn to the question. And thank you, Dorota Trekkie, for wishing Dana good luck. I'm sure she would appreciate that if she were here. All right, let's turn now to the patron questions. And the first patron question is from Mike Garcia, who says, "Hi, Steve. I love your videos, and I love that you do these Ask Away streams. Here's my question. From stuff you've said on these streams before, I'm guessing you're an introvert who doesn't like going out to social gatherings and such. I'm an introvert, and sometimes I feel shitty about it. Do you ever feel shitty or guilty about being an introvert? Like, do you feel you're missing out on aspects of life that could benefit you? Or do you feel like you're disappointing people if you don't go to their social events? Or do you possess enough self confidence and self awareness to be comfortable with your introverted self?" Kind of a weird personal question. Apologies if I'm pushing boundaries here. Thanks. Oh, no, it's not. You're not pushing. I mean, thank you for being considerate of that, but no, you're not pushing boundaries. Um, I guess I am an introvert much of the time. I mean, in practice, I am an introvert in the sense that most of the time I would prefer just to stay home and keep my own company and work or watch TV, or just kind of be on my own. Like, I'm not someone who craves social gatherings or anything like that. And even when I do feel like being with other people, it's like a small group. It's like I might want to hang out with one or two other people. I don't want to be around a lot of people. So in practice, I guess I am an introvert, but in the right situation, I can be very extroverted. If I'm with the right group of people, or if it's the right situation where I do feel comfortable, or I do feel like I have something to contribute by being a bit more extroverted, by being a bit more up, then I can do that quite comfortably and quite easily. It just depends on the circumstance. But I guess for the most of the time in practice, I guess I am pretty introverted. And as for, do I ever feel shitty about it? Never. And I guess I don't know if it's completely fair to chalk that up to self-confidence or self-awareness or not, but no, or maybe I don't know, but no, I have never felt bad or felt guilty about not going to other people's events. If someone invites me to a thing and I either can't make it or just don't want to go, I have never felt the least bit guilty saying no. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it in a way that hurts somebody's feelings. If somebody invited me to a thing and I said, "Fuck you, I'm not going," like I would feel bad about that. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But diplomatically turning down an invitation because I just don't want to go, I've never felt the least bit bad about that. Um, and feeling like I'm missing out on aspects of life, and not really. Not really. I mean, again, there are particular people that I might miss spending time with, or particular places or particular types of events or gatherings that I might think, oh, I wish I could have gone to that, or I wish I could do that more often, something like that. But in general, no, I don't feel that way about it. I don't. But yeah, thanks for the question. Next question is from Stephen G. Clenard, who says, I seem to recall you mentioning at some point that Zack Snyder's somewhat idiosyncratic characterization of the Kents, Ma, Pa, Clark, rather marred your enjoyment of Man of Steel. I'm curious if your assessment would have been better if it had been presented as an otherworld's alternate reality story. In this case, something like Red Sun, except instead of landing in Smallville or Soviet Russia, baby Kal-El crash landed in Galt's Gulch. Thoughts? I think something like that would have helped. I think if Clark's parents in Man of Steel were shitty in a way that we in the audience were supposed to notice how shitty they are, that definitely would have helped. I remember saying I think in my first review of the movie, and then I think I've mentioned it a time or two when I've talked about it since. One of the big problems with Man of Steel and with the Zack Snyder version of Superman in general across the other films that he's appeared in has been the massive gulf between how he is talked about and perceived by other characters in the movie and what he is like based on what we actually see him do. He is treated and spoken about by other characters as though he is more of a typical Superman, as though he is, the champion of the downtrodden and the guy who's always there to save the day and this great shining beacon of truth and justice and this amazing hero, like, for instance, the Christopher Reeve version of Superman, or like he's typically depicted in the comic books, or like he is in the animated series, or like he has been in Superman and Lois. And he's not like that in those movies. Like the Zack Snyder version of Superman is not remotely like that. He's grim and sullen and put upon and self-absorbed and seems to treat being a hero and being Superman as a burden, and just is violent and not particularly bright and destructive and just not at all an inspiring heroic figure, like not remotely. But he is spoken about as though he is. A lot of the stuff in the Justice League, in both versions of the Justice League, but especially I think in the theatrical cut, because one of the things Joss Whedon did was try to sort of rehabilitate this version of Superman and make him into more of a heroic character. And one of the ways he did that was have Batman all of a sudden decide that Superman was like his hero and talk about Superman as though, oh, he was the best of us and I judged him so wrongly and we need to bring him back because he's the hero that we really need, and he's what the people of the earth need. And he's talking about what sounds like a completely different character than the person we've seen in the movies up to this point. He just hasn't he's never been presented in that way at all, but characters in the movies talk about him as though he is. So that to me suggests an extreme lack of awareness on the part of the filmmakers and on the part of the movie itself. The movie doesn't get how bad its version of Superman is. The movie doesn't get how unheroic he is. So if the movie had been made with that awareness, if the movie had been made with the sense of, let's see what would happen if Superman had awful parents who taught him the opposite lessons of the lessons that his parents usually teach him in other versions of Superman, that definitely would have been improvement. At least that would have been a take. At least that would have been a little bit of a smarter perspective to say, like, let's do this on purpose and show you Superman as though he were raised by terrible, selfish parents, and then see what a terrible, selfish Superman he turns into. And that becomes the point of the movie of, like, see, look, he has shitty parents. He turns up, he grows into a shitty Superman. Who would have thought? I still don't think it would be a very good movie, or at least I don't know if it wouldn't be a very um, it wouldn't be a very sort of crowd pleasing or heartwarming, like popcorn movie. It would be a really depressing character study and what happens, how bad parents can completely break the life of a child. It doesn't sound like a Superman movie a lot of people would line up to see. but at least it would be a step above what we actually got. So yeah, that layer of self-awareness would definitely have been an improvement. Would it have made it a good movie? I don't know, but it definitely would have been an improvement. Sukareva syndrome. Steve, I saw your picture about the requirements that LEOs or law enforcement officers should have. I would add to them the requirement that police must carry malpractice insurance. The fact is, police are in a position of authority over the people they encounter that involves the risk of life and limb in danger. Also, cops should get their licenses, certifications to practice from the state bar. Fact is, these field prosecution agents are practicing law when they enforce it, and those civil regulatory boards are almost always ineffective. State bars should revoke them when necessary, and no one who has ever worked in law enforcement should be allowed to weigh in. You don't want insiders engaging in regulatory capture, allowing dirty cops to remain on the force. Believe it or not, some people think that cops aren't practicing law when they enforce it. How that makes sense is beyond me. Cops should be treated the same as lawyers, since what they do stands to be used in court. I have never heard it described that way, but that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I do think we should maintain a distinction between law enforcement and the judicial system. I think that line is a very important one. But I do think the idea of holding cops to similar standards as lawyers, holding cops to the same ethical and professional standards as lawyers when it comes to how they enforce the laws is a really good idea. And just speaking generally, I think more regulation and more oversight, civilian oversight, non-police oversight of police is a really good idea and is a really necessary idea. And if what you're describing is like whether it's literally the state bar, the same organization that oversees lawyers, or whether it's an equivalent organization with a similar mission and similar powers for police officers, either way, I think that's a really good idea. I think increased oversight over cops and increased raising standards and then being absolutely ruthless about enforcing those standards, so that you take additional steps to make sure you are getting the best cops you possibly can. And when you do find bad cops, or you do find cops that just keep screwing up and are seemingly incapable of doing the job properly for whatever reason, you can get rid of them. It's a public safety issue. They don't have a right to be a cop. They don't have a right to a job as a cop. And if they show that they are incapable of doing that job in a way that is within the bounds of the law and is them acting in the interest of the public as opposed to harming the public, then you need to be able to get rid of them. So I think something like this is a great idea. Yeah. And I like I say, I've never heard it described as cops are practicing law, but when you put it that way and you describe what you mean, it does make sense to me. Toilet Blaze pop quiz. Martin Scorsese might have been talking about the difference between mafia movies, drama based on the news, and sci-fi has fictional or theoretical plot lines as a way of highlighting attention to detail in mafia movies. As an example, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones, but the first 4 or 5 seasons had scripts based on books, while the last couple of seasons had no such basis, leading to the ending of the series being awful. Make sense? Calling COVID the Chinese virus is racist, but when the good Biden media are calling a variant the Brazilian or South African variant, it's fine, as it's the good media doing it, and the good media is never racist. Am I right? Finally, I saw an example of an expired invisibility potion for any RPG, which would make your flesh and organs invisible, but your bones and equipment make you a clothed walking skeleton for an hour. Any ideas of any other kinds of potions and their past the best before date effects might be? Anybody want to guess who sent this question in? Just based on the demented, rambling grab bag nature of it. Let me see. What can I possibly do with this? What you're saying about the Scorsese talking about the difference between mafia movies and sci-fi movies in terms of the attention to detail. I see what you're saying. I don't know if that's necessarily what Scorsese was saying, but I think I see what you're saying. And as for your example about Game of Thrones, I never watched Game of Thrones. It never seemed remotely interesting to me. I do understand that eventually the show sort of outran the books, and eventually the show was making episodes that weren't based on the books. I don't think that's necessarily uh, the cause of the series getting worse, though. I mean, there have been other shows and movies that began as adaptations of books, but then eventually started doing their own thing, and they turned out fine. There was a really great show a couple years ago that actually has a new season out that I haven't had a chance to watch any of yet, but the original version, the original American version of In Treatment, which starred Gabriel Byrne. The first, it was based not on a book, but it was based on an Israeli TV series that was highly acclaimed and was thought of as just a brilliant piece of work. And the first two seasons of the American version of In Treatment were based on the two seasons of the original Israeli show. And then the third season of the Gabriel Byrne version of In Treatment was not based on anything, was just its own original material that the writers of that show had created for the third season. And it was still really good. So it's not necessarily going to happen that if you start out as an adaptation of a book or of some pre-existing material, and then you move beyond that and start doing your own thing, it doesn't, it's not automatic that it's going to start to suck. I think you could argue that if Game of Thrones was really good when it was adapting the books and then all of a sudden it got shitty when they got away from the books, maybe that's just bad writing. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with getting away from the books. It could be the show just got some bad writing. It reminds me of the complaint that a lot of people make, but not the complaint necessarily, but the attempt to explain why the in the minds of a lot of people why the sequel trilogy of Star Wars was underwhelming. And one of the common explanations is, well, they didn't have a plan. They were just making it up as they went along. They should have had a plan for the three film arc at the beginning. And there's no guarantee that that would have meant that it was any good either. I mean, you could pre-plan all three movies and still make three lousy movies. You could also make it up as you go along and make three great movies. I mean, there's no guarantee either way. People seem to forget the original Star Wars trilogy. Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi were, for the most part, made up as they went along. I know that there has been this sort of myth created largely by George Lucas himself that, oh, this was this masterwork that he had plotted out years and years ago, and he had this massive Bible, and he knew everything that was going to happen, and he just had to, he made the first movie, and then he just needed to do the other two movies to finish the first movie. And that's horseshit. That's not true. That's just not true. And there are interviews and insights from a lot of other people involved in the production of the original Star Wars trilogy that tell us that that's just not true. George Lucas didn't know that Darth Vader was going to turn out to be Luke's father. George Lucas didn't know that Princess Leia was going to turn out to be Luke's sister. Like, a lot of really important stuff in the original Star Wars trilogy was made up as they went along. And the original Star Wars trilogy, for the most part, I think turned out pretty good. So there's nothing wrong with making it up as you go along. There's no guarantee that just because you have a game plan to follow, that it's going to turn out good. Like, it all depends on the execution. And if Game of Thrones started to suck after it outran the books, that's an execution issue. That's not necessarily a not having books issue. As for the COVID Chinese virus racist thing, I'm not sure what point you're trying to make there. I feel like calling COVID the Chinese virus was racist because racist people insisted on doing it, even after people pointed out that it was, a problematic thing to say. And by the time people were calling it the China virus or the Wuhan flu, like, it had spread all over the world, it was no longer a Chinese problem. Whereas if you're naming a variant of the virus after the geographical region where it originated, and you're not doing it in a way that is meant to rile up racists, I feel like that is kind of a different thing. And as for the potion thing, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't give a shit about RPGs. I don't give a shit about potions. So I got nothing on that. But thank you for your question. David Colby says, I recently began to replay Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, which is as the title may suggest, Battlestar Galactica game. It's really good, but it has reminded me of how steep and sudden the drop in quality for the Battlestar Galactica remake was. Season 1 to 2.5, real good. Season 2.6 and beyond, garbage. And don't get me started on the ending. Which is your wow, that took a turn show? Starkest, fastest drop from good to bad? And does it also coincide with a massive writer strike like Battlestar Galactica did? I can think of a couple of examples. One of the most drastic, where like the quality just fell off a cliff immediately, was the original run of Roseanne. The original Roseanne was a good to great show for about its first 7 years. I mean, there was maybe a little bit of a decline when you got into the later seasons, but not a drastic one. And then season 8, all of a sudden, it was just awful. I mean, there was no transitional period from, oh, it's just kind of okay. And I mean, it went from being a once great, still pretty good show to just being absolute dog shit. And then the ninth season was even worse. The ninth season was just, I mean, it was just dreck. It was dread. There wasn't a laugh in the whole season. It was awful. So that's an example that I can point to. Another one is I used to be a big fan of the show Chicago Hope, which was the hospital drama in the 90s that wasn't ER. and and I never really liked ER. I was never a big ER fan, but I used to watch Chicago Hope religiously. But midway through, I think the second season, Mandy Patinkin, who had been the star of the series, left the show, and of course he was brilliant and played a really interesting, great character. He left the show. Peter McNichol, who had played a very important supporting character on the show, left the show, and David E. Kelley, who was the creator and had been the primary writer, left the show. So the basically the creator and the showrunner, the star, and one of the most important supporting players all left the show at the same time. And it was never the same show. I mean, it was not it did not recover at all. And it happened midway through the season. It wasn't like they finished the season and then they came back, and it was literally 1 week. It was a great show. And Mandy Patinkin and Peter McNichol's last episode was a really good episode. And then the next week it started up and it was like, oh, it's not going to be the same show. It was immediate, the effect that was felt by the loss of those actors and by the loss of the showrunner and the primary creative force behind the show. So that would be another example that I would point to as something like that. Danny K. Hi, Steve. Although you're an atheist now, was there ever a time in your life when you were a person of faith? If so, how would you describe your journey from belief to non-belief? Was there a proverbial come to Jesus moment? Thank you very much. Hope all is well. There was not a single moment. There was not a single experience that made me an atheist or made me renounce my religious faith or anything. I was raised in a nominally Christian household. We were never super devout. We went to church, I think, over the course of one spring and summer when I was 6 to 7 years old. And that was about it. So we were never terribly devout. And my dad's family, my paternal grandparents were not particularly religious. My mom's side of the family was very religious, but we weren't really close with them. So, no, I was not raised in a super religious family. I was nominally a Christian. I went through a series of transitions in terms of my religious faith in my teens and early 20s, where I went from being a believer to someone who wanted to believe but didn't really, and eventually someone who just admitted that I didn't believe. And when I look back now, I don't think I ever really believed in my heart. Like, there was a long period where I wanted it to be true, and then what I wanted to be true would change. Where at first it was pretty much what I had been taught as the Christian faith, my family's version of how they perceived and conceived Christianity, and how they interpreted the Bible, et cetera, et cetera. And then I sort of moved from that to, well, I just want there to be a God. I don't really think a lot of this stuff in the Bible is true, but I hope that there is at least a God, or at least an afterlife. That something, my big thing was fear of death, not wanting to die and just vanish from existence. So I would say, and I would hope that there was some kind of afterlife, that something in some way we're able to continue after the end of physical life. And I tried so hard to believe that for so long because I wanted it to be true so badly. And I still do. I would love if that was true, but I no longer believe it or try to believe it because I don't see any evidence for it. I feel like it would be dishonest with myself to say I believe that or to try and believe that when I don't, and when I honestly don't think it's true, and I don't think that there's evidence for it to be true. But it was a gradual process. It wasn't something that I had like a moment where I was like, oh shit, that's it. I'm an atheist now. It was a process, and it was coming to terms with it. It was admitting to myself that I didn't believe it, and then being able to admit it. That was what that journey was. Isaiah Taylor, so Steve, can I have some advice? So a couple of years ago, I was mean to a cosplay girl who also had autism based out of Atlanta. I was immature and rude over something incredibly pointless. Now I want to atone for my transgressions, but I think I burned that bridge long ago. I talked to her mom, and she said that she didn't want to reestablish with me at this time. I feel like my repeated invoices on trying to make amends have gone unanswered. We have common traits, cosplay and autism, and I kind of have a crush on her. Should I move on and learn my lesson, or should I still hold on to hope? Thoughts? If you have reached out already, either directly to her or through her mom, as you say, if you've already reached out and the answer is no, then I think you need to move on. At least in terms of how you I mean, I think you should stop trying to contact her and stop trying to get her to talk to you, or stop trying to sort of reestablish that connection with her. If she has made it clear that she's not up for that, she's not interested in that, then I think you need to respect that. How you feel about her in your own heart, how you feel about her privately, that is your burden to carry, and how you deal with that on your own is up to you. And I have no standing to advise you on that. I am certainly no one. I am certainly not fit to tell anyone how they should feel about, or how they, whether or not they should have a crush on somebody, or still have feelings for somebody that they used to like, or whether or not you should still feel guilty about the way you treated them. Like I am not fit to judge you or to advise you on stuff like that. I do think in terms of how you behave toward her, if she has said she doesn't want to reestablish a connection with you, then you should back off and respect that. And as for how you feel about her, I mean, sometimes you feel how you feel. And if you have a crush on her, if you have feelings for her, those don't go away as easily as you might want them to. Or as easy as, or as quickly as it might be to make things easier for you. That's just not the way that works. So I mean, I don't really know what to tell you as far as that goes. You may have to find your own way in terms of dealing with that, and getting past that, and moving on with that. You're trying to move on. But in terms of of your actual relationship with her, I think you need to move on as far as that goes. Yeah. Andrew Priest says, hi, Steve. I originally had a hard-hitting and hugely relevant question, but the more of it I typed, the more it made me sad. Instead, I'm going to ask a question on behalf of my daughter. Who's your best superhero? My best is Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and my favorite color is orange. I told her she really should be a patron to ask such a lame question, but thought I'd do it just this one time. And Kara is going to be seeing this bit, so watch your language, for fuck's sake. Well, okay, in that case, that will be your F-bomb as her father will be the last F-bomb I will drop in this answer. My best superhero, what an interesting way to phrase that question. My best superhero, I usually say that it's either Superman or Batman, but those are like my favorites of sort of the major headline superheroes. My real favorite is Nightwing. And Kara, I don't know if you know Nightwing or not. You probably do if you know Spider-Man, and you're probably pretty smart to comic books. But Nightwing, for anybody who doesn't know, is Dick Grayson all grown up. He's the original Robin who since grew up and adopted his own superhero identity. So Dick Grayson slash Nightwing is probably my favorite, or would be my pick for the best superhero. But Miles Morales is a good one. Miles Morales is a really, really great character and a great Spider-Man, and was the star of Into the Spider-Verse, which is, in the opinion of a lot of people, the best Spider-Man movie, and certainly in my opinion, one of the very best Spider-Man movies and one of the very best superhero movies, period. So Miles Morales is a great pick for best superhero. But if I had to choose, I would probably say Nightwing is my favorite. So thank you so much for the question. And thank you for stealing your dad's question. That's a good move. Jason Harding, much to our combined sorrow, Yahoo Answers is no more. Where else will we be able to see the questions asked by some of the most intellectually deficient members of our society now? I propose that Ask Away become that new place. So to start, Steve, here's my question. If elbows are the knees of the arm, are knees the finger thingies of the leg? Well, first of all, if you're looking for a place to take the place of Yahoo Answers as far as questions answered by people who have no business answering those questions, have you considered Reddit? Uh, it's funny. Sometimes I'll see people sharing these like Reddit posts, and especially if there's like these subreddits. It's like, I think one of them is malicious compliance or wholesome compliance, and it's basically what it boils down to is it's these Reddits that are dedicated to people telling long, pointless stories in a very poor way. Is basically what it is. I'll read these Reddit posts, and it just goes on and on forever. And the point of it is just some weak ass, like, personal anecdote with a really, really weak, if it even has a punchline, it's a really weak, obvious punchline that you see coming a mile away. And it's just boring and poorly written, and written as though the person writing it just assumes that we have all fucking day to read this. Like, there's no pacing, there's no editing, there's no sense of, it's really bad writing. It's basically a Reddit dedicated to the sharing and the celebration of awful autobiographical writing. And I do not get the appeal. I'll see people share these posts that have thousands, tens of thousands of upvotes. And I'm like, what is the appeal? What is the appeal of reading an overlong, boring, pointless, unfunny story? I don't get it, but that's a lot of what Reddit has become. I guess it's better than like Donald Trump apologia and Nazism, but I don't get the appeal. But anyway, perhaps Reddit if you're missing Yahoo Answers. And as for if elbows are the knees of the arm, are knees the finger thingies of the leg? No, knees are actually the neck of the leg. And I will leave you to contemplate that. And also, I'll think about it a little bit too to see if I can make it make sense. But just off the top of my head, yeah, knees are the necks. Knees are the necks of the leg. I mean, or maybe they're the jaws of the leg. I don't know. They're the other parts of the parts. They're not that part. They're another part, but they're that other part of that part. There's your Yahoo answer. It's probably more coherent than you would have gotten on Yahoo Answers, to be honest. And then again, but it was also a more coherent question than would have typically been asked. Some random geek who will continue to do agitprop in the form of a question. Okay. Joanna Roberts, Phoenix, Tavi the Wolfus, Naz the Nico, Lina Quinn, Arson 3, Emma Void, Christy Abbey, Kevin Logan, Robinette, Aerodactyl, Foxy Jazabel, Shiloh Connor, Leto Anor, Lady Columbia, Socialist Ninja, Ryan. Those are all the people I know, a little or a lot, that have or are still currently e-begging because of unemployment, food insecurity, housing insecurity, or needs money for medical transition, or that $400 surprise expense that 78% of folks can't afford at all. That was before 2020. How many unemployed do we still have? 60 million or more? When the eviction moratorium ends at the end of June, what relief will people get? I regularly get DMs from friends that need money for food, sometimes twice a week. Do you have friends like that? How many do you know that e-begs in order to live? I'm afraid the 99% will all have our own GoFundMe for basic needs. We will get any we get any relief from this system with how slow the system is intended to work. Am I wrong? Um, I mean, I don't think you're wrong in terms of the situation there. I mean, I do think people who are living on fixed incomes or low incomes, or people like your friends that you mentioned above, um, I do think there is too often the assumption that, well, it's not just the assumption, it's putting the onus on the people. It's saying, well, you have to figure this out. Like if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, if you don't have enough money to put food on your table or keep a roof over your head, it's your responsibility to figure this out, even if part of the reason you can't put food on the table or put a roof over your head is because you have an illness or a disability or have just incurred some kind of unexpected crisis in your life, and you were caught flat-footed, and you don't, or you just don't have the resources for whatever reason. Like, somehow it's your responsibility to do something about it. It's not the responsibility of the government or the community or the society around you or whatever. And I think that's just a really harmful assumption, and not the assumption we should be making. So, do I get DMs from friends like that? Not as frequently as you do, but yes, of course, I get DMs from people who need money, or who more often than people asking me personally for money, is people just, who have a GoFundMe or have a PayPal link or have something that they need to circulate, and they'll ask me to share, which I'm always happy to do. But yeah, yeah, of course. I think probably most of us do. That we at least know people. If we have not been in that situation ourselves, we at least know people who have been, and who we've tried to help. I think that's a very common experience, and there's no excuse for it. I mean, and I know this is a cliche, and it gets said too often, but I mean, in the United States, in the richest, most powerful country in the world, it's no excuse for that. There's no excuse to have people in that situation when there is enough money to go around. We're just not letting it go around. you know but no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. General Contact Unit Problem Child 1. Suppose you believe in stuff like wealth redistribution, but you also have really gross ideas about trans people and Muslims. Are you on the left or right? Thomas responded to that article claiming the new atheist merged with the far right. He said it didn't make sense to him to put someone like Dawkins on the far right when he also believes in a lot of lib stuff the far right hate. Thoughts on that take? 2, if this administration is going to be prevented from getting anything done, is it better one of the progressive candidates didn't become one of them? I guess one of the more progressive candidates didn't become president. Like, suppose the Biden administration gets nothing done and loses in 24. In the 2028 Dem primary, you're going to have to try and get the party to support a progressive nominee. Now imagine if it had been 4 ineffective years of Warren rather than Biden. Every time you try to drum up support for AOC, people would say, well, we voted in a progressive last time and nothing changed. Why would AOC be any different? At least in this timeline, we won't have to deal with that. No, you'll have to deal with people opposing a progressive for another reason. I mean, I do think there is a Democratic establishment. There is a sort of mainline part of the Democratic Party that will be resistant to a more progressive nominee, no matter what the situation. Whether the president had been Biden or Warren or Sanders or any name your more progressive candidate than Biden. No matter what, there would still be a certain number of Democrats, especially entrenched, established party powers that be, that seem to lean more centrist than left, that would balk at that. I think that's something we're going to have to contend with for the foreseeable future, no matter what. So I don't really see that the same way that you do. I guess I'm a little bit more fatalistic that whether the current administration was being blocked from doing kind of progressive stuff or being blocked from doing really progressive stuff, either way, it wouldn't make a difference. When we get to the time to pick Biden's successor, I think there's always going to be people in the Democratic Party that will oppose a more progressive candidate, no matter what the record or the progressive credentials of the previous Democratic president were. And as for number 1, here's my take on this whole thing. I like Thomas a lot. I don't have anything bad to say about Thomas personally or about Thomas's show or anything like. I think he's a good guy. I consider him one of the bright spots of the movement, and still do. But I am a little baffled by why he, not just him, but why other people who sort of agree with him on this think that it's worth all this blood, sweat, and tears to try and um, salvage something of Richard Dawkins or salvage something of Sam Harris or to fight these battles and say, well, yeah, their views about trans people are shitty, or yeah, their views about Muslims are shitty, but what about this and this? So should we really say that they're far right? I mean, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not proposing any sort of course of action for the movement or the community, but from where I stand, who gives a shit whether Richard Dawkins personally is far right or deserves to be? I mean, I don't care what category you sort him into based on the overall, collection of his political beliefs. He says things repeatedly over the course of years and years that are harmful to trans people and that promote and help um, to preserve anti-trans sentiment in the atheist skeptic community, because he is still seen as a leading light of that community. So he makes the atheist community shittier when he does these things, when he says things against trans people, when he says things against Muslims. The same thing with Sam Harris, the same thing with Bill Maher, the same thing with all of these shitty ass atheists who, yes, okay, and if they took the political compass test, they would be further to the left than they would be to the right. They're right about a lot of different stuff, but the stuff that they're wrong about, they keep talking about over and over again, and they're causing real harm. And as long as they're doing that, if someone writes an article for Salon that the point of which is to point out how shitty they are and how poorly they reflect on the community as a whole, my response to that is not going to fucking nitpick and say, well, yeah, but come on, you can't say they're far right. Like, who gives a shit? They're an embarrassment. They're a black mark on the community. Let's stop rushing to their defense, even if we're trying to do it in a nuanced way that doesn't gloss over the negative stuff about it. Why are we running to their defense at all? Fuck Richard Dawkins. Fuck, if somebody calls him far right and that's not entirely accurate, I don't fucking care at this point. Fuck him and fuck Sam Harris and fuck the rest of them. I'm not going to waste any breath trying to defend them or trying to correct inaccuracies pointed at, because I don't fucking care. They're not worth it. And I'm a little flummoxed that other people seem to still think that they are worth it. So that's where I come down. It's nothing against Thomas. I don't think he's a bad guy. I completely understand where Ina's coming from in it. And I completely understand why she's frustrated and disappointed in a lot of this, because she has been one of the people who has been spending the most time and energy talking about, why it's important that we recognize why someone like Sam Harris is a detriment to the atheist movement instead of an asset. And to have people, and same thing with Richard Dawkins. And then to have people coming in and saying, well, sure, you can say everything you want about Dawkins, say anything you want about Harris, but I mean, come on, they're not far right. Like, you're still wasting effort defending them and carrying water for them. And I don't get why that is time well spent. I just don't. So that's where I come out on that. Agent Meister, Peldor Joy, Steve, with the vaccine making a positive impact on COVID, we in the EU are making tentative plans for travel within the bloc for the first time in 18 months. I love to travel and consider myself privileged to have been able to do so. I've graced Maryland with my presence. And fun fact, I was visiting northern India when I first discovered your Ask Away videos. Anywho, what have you done much travel in your life, Steve? What's the furthest you've been from home, and have you ever left the U.S.? If in our respective travels I see you walking down the street, I intend to shout phrases like "A la Marine" and or "Dabo," and I expect you to reply in kind. Please don't take that for a request, Shives. I'm one of your patrons, and you do as you're damn well told. Gotta go now, Steve, as there's something coming through the wormhole. That might have something to do with last night's burrito. Bye, Agent Meister. Lovely. Thank you for that. Um, of course. So if I ever hear some random jack off yelling "Alamarain" at me from like across the street, I'll assume that that's you, and I'll be like, "Agent Meister, what's up?" Um, I know I have not. I am not very widely traveled. I think the furthest I've never been outside the United States. I think the furthest I've ever been from home is probably Tallahassee, Florida. Yes, I'm not terribly widely traveled at all. No, but if perchance we ever cross paths and you greet me by screaming catchphrases from Deep Space Nine, I will happily reply. I will happily reply. Uh, Russell, hey Steve, I recently rewatched Children of Time, and it got me wondering a few things. One, is Odo wrong for actions a version of himself did? Sort of reminds me of Voyager's relativity and Captain Braxton. Moreover, had they not returned to their own present, Cisco, the emissary, and Odo, a changeling, would have cost more lives and upset the war into the Dominion's favor, which leads me to my final thought. I think of TOS Errand of Mercy. Was the Dominion War raided by the Prophet's wormhole aliens? I know that is a lot, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Well, Children of Time is the Deep Space Nine episode where the crew of the Defiant discover a planet where the population is made up of descendants of them uh, that resulted from the Defiant crashing after like some kind of time warp thing, threw it back in time, and then they crashed on the planet. So the present day people on the planet are the descendants of them from back in time. It's a really cool episode. It's a really great concept, and it creates a really great moral dilemma of should they try to avoid the accident that threw them back in time, or should they allow the accident to happen so that all these people will still exist? It's a really good episode, and I mean, I think one of the things that makes it a good episode is that it doesn't lead you to believe that one thing or another is the right thing to do. It sits in that impossibility, that indecision, that, oh, no matter what I do, something bad is going to happen. So what is the best thing to do? Do I strand myself and my crew on this planet in the past and get some of them killed, which I know is going to happen? Or do I avoid that, but in doing so erase these other people from existence? Like it's a really great moral dilemma. And I mean, I think part of it, what you're saying is like, is the present day Odo responsible for what his future version does? What about the implications of what happens to their descendants if they do avoid the accident and leave, and weigh that against their contribution of the Dominion War? um you know I feel like one of the messages, maybe if there is a message of that episode, is that you have to live your life with the knowledge that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, and even the the crew of the Defiant in that episode, even though they're sort of um even though they're facing like their own descendant, there's still a degree of uncertainty as to what will happen. They could fulfill that destiny and create and continue down the chain of events that creates those people, or they could do something else and change that future. So even in that situation, their future is in a sense yet to be written. They can still change the outcome, and that's the situation that we're all in everyday life. You have to live with the knowledge that you don't have certain knowledge of the future, and make the decision that you think is the best thing for you right now. But part of that decision is also forecasting what might happen as a result of it and how you feel about that. So and it's challenging. It's challenging, but it's sort of the situation that we're in. Like, we every day are in the same situation that the crew of the Defiant is in that episode. And as for you mentioned Errand of Mercy in relation to the Dominion War. um I guess you're talking about the Organians, and how they decided to not allow the Klingons and the Federation to fight, and maybe did the wormhole aliens do something similar for the Dominion War? I mean, I think it was probably the case that the wormhole aliens, until they were sort of forced to deal with it by Captain Sisko, or persuaded very strongly to take part in it by Captain Sisko, they would rather just completely stay out of it. The wormhole aliens didn't seem terribly interested in it at all, except for that time in I think the Sacrifice of Angels was the episode where Cisco convinced them to stop the Dominion fleet from coming through the wormhole because he said, they will destroy Bajor. Other than that, it didn't seem like the prophets really took a very active, not just an active role, but didn't seem to be all that interested in the war. So it doesn't seem to be analogous to the Organians in Errand of Mercy, but that's an interesting parallel to draw for sure. Jim Baker, this week's Powerball Lotto in my state is worth $63 million. My question is, what would you do with $63 million? I would give a bunch of it to my dad. I would probably give a bunch of it to my now ex-wife. I would give a lot of it away to friends and family, and give a lot of it to charity. I would probably buy the houses on either side of this house and the houses across the street, and just have like a little section of the street that was just mine. To sort of create a little bit more buffer between me and the neighbors, have a bigger yard, and stuff like that. A little bit more property, maybe a little bit more of a zone of silence around me. That would be great. Buy some upgraded equipment to make videos with, be able to hire people to help me so I could make more elaborate videos, maybe make a movie. I mean, a relatively sort of low budget movie. I mean, stuff like that. Take care of myself, take care of people that I care about, financially speaking, and give a lot of it away to help people in need, and use a certain amount of it for creative stuff, to do work that I care about, and that gives my life meaning. So generally speaking, it would be something like that. Steve. Hi, Steve. You have to assemble. Oh, it's one of these questions. Steve. You have to assemble a Starfleet crew from across all shows and movies. Kelvin versions of Kirk and company can be doubled up with their main universe counterparts. Who do you put in each position? Supporting characters such as Nog can also be used if that helps. I know no disrespect to you, Steve. I thank you for being a patron or a member. I do not find these questions remotely interesting or entertaining. So I'm going to say, by sheer shocking, amazing coincidence, the crew I would pick would be the exact crew of Captain Picard's Enterprise D. Isn't that amazing? I would have Picard be the captain. I would have Riker be the first officer. I would have Data at the ops station. I would have Worf as chief of security. I would have Crusher as the doctor. I would have Geordi as the chief engineer. There would be a counselor on the ship, and it would be Counselor Troy. That's my answer. I hope I hope that doesn't come across as being too much of a smartass, but I'm really just not into questions like that at all. But thank you very much for asking, and thank you for your support. Murray Ziller, Scotty Bax is totally canon now. Also, thanks. I didn't realize Siddig's channel was exactly what I needed. Speaking of Alexander Siddig's YouTube channel, Sid City. I grew up clubbing on Canal Street, the gay quarter of my home city, Manchester in the UK. I was bi-curious at the time. Turns out I'm not sexually into men, but I find beauty in them, even physically. That place gave me the ability and security to figure that out and be comfortable with whatever I found of myself, instead of me just descending into toxic masculinity. I'm a carpenter, and the gay quarter asked my company to make them some pride-decorated planters. I was so happy to be able to give something back to a community that allowed me the safety and space in order to find out who I was. Just simple painted planters, still some of my proudest pieces of work. Just been told they want more of my work as well. Don't know if there's a label for people like me in the LGBTQ plus lexicon, but I don't need it. I've always been made to feel welcome and part of that community. Now, that is Murray Ziller's first question. He asked a second question, which I usually don't allow and am not going to allow from this point on. But because the second question included some additional information about what he was talking about, and I felt it was important, given what was said in the first question, and because this is Pride Month, and I don't want to not share like a really positive story about LGBTQ representation and stuff like that. I'm going to share the second submission that he made in the question form, but please nobody else do this, because this is a one-time only thing. This is an exception to the rule. But he goes on to say also, and I'm sorry if I'm breaking the rules by submitting another form, someone got in touch with me about the rainbow planters I made for Canal Street. Turns out he was colorblind and had some corrective glasses brought for his birthday by his wife. And he told me he walked up to one of the planters I made and took a photo and sent it to his wife because he was so excited to see a rainbow. I don't think anything I ever do will top that. I can shit Mona Lisas, and nothing will beat a grown man telling me you made the first rainbow I ever saw. Thank you. Sometimes the smallest things we do can impact people in the biggest ways. So there you go, Steve. I helped someone see their first rainbow. What have you ever done? I love your work. Well, again, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I don't think I can boast anything like that. That is really cool. I can only imagine how good that feels, as a crafts person, as as someone who clearly you take pride in your work, to have someone say something like that to you, say, one of those rainbows that you made was the first rainbow I ever got to see. Like, that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that, my friend. Thank you very much for sharing that. Jacob Monroe. Hello, Steve. We've all talked about the importance of raising the minimum wage and helping combat the worsening wealth gap in this country. But with how out of control it has gotten in the last year or so, do you think it is time to start seriously considering the possibility of creating a maximum wage or income? I would rather handle it just through more progressive taxation. Because presumably, if you create a maximum wage, but you don't impose any other sort of requirements as to what is done with the money that would be paid on that wage otherwise, the company could put that money somewhere else. I mean, unless you say, like, this is the maximum wage that anybody can make, and and you also put in some kind of requirement that, like, a company that makes more than a certain amount of money a year must distribute those profits to the employees in accordance with a certain percentage, or there must be it can't be beyond a certain ratio of executives to work, or something like that. Like, I guess I could see something like that working, but in general, I would just rather see much more progressive taxation, so that you can make as high of an income as you want. You can earn all the money you possibly can during the year. There's no ceiling on it. But when you get up into those upper echelons where you're making, millions or even billions a year, that a vast majority of that is going to be taken by the government in the forms of taxes. So, I mean, in a sense, there's a maximum. There would be a maximum wage, or at least, for a lot of people, there would, in all practicality, there would be a maximum take-home wage. Or I mean, really, there wouldn't, because it would you could always earn more money. It would just be taken in a certain percentage of it would always be taken by the government. I would rather do that than impose a maximum wage. I think, and I mean, when we get up into the area of people that are earning, millions of dollars a year or more, like the super wealthy who just have these incredibly, just unthinkably massive annual incomes, above a certain level, I'm completely fine with the tax rate being absolutely fucking confiscatory. Like 95% of everything you earn above a certain threshold just is straight into the, into the government's coffers. I'm completely fine with that. And I would rather, and I mean, I do think redistributing wealth is important. I do think, raising revenue through the government to help people who are on the bottom, who can't afford to, as we were talking about earlier with some random geeks question, who can't afford to pay their bills or keep a roof over their head. I feel like we need to raise the floor a great deal in this country, and I would rather do that through stuff like very, very progressive taxation on extremely high levels of income than something like creating a maximum wage. But I'm sure there's ways you could do it that would make sense, that would work. It just wouldn't be my first thought. Carl Roberts, hey Steve, your latest video commentary on our culture through the lenses of Star Trek and the present state of the organized atheist community is pure genius. I'm sure you're tired of having me say that by now. Not yet. I'm curious how you remain so committed to justice and joy for all humanity when, as a white identifying cis hetero male, you could easily give passive allegiance to causes where you have little to no skin in the game. And beyond your own experience, why do you think it's so difficult for other white identifying Americans to understand that our collective joy, freedom, and well being is inextricably linked? Though some may find this question a bit heady, I'm confident you'll critically address it with your usual intellectual sensitivity surrounding you and wishes for continued joy. Well, thank you. As always, thank you so much for saying some wonderfully nice things, my friend, and for asking a question like that. I really, really appreciate it and appreciate you. How do I remain so committed to justice and joy for all humanity when I could just give passive allegiance to causes? A lot of it is that I have good friends who will knock me back on the road if I start to veer off. That's a big part of it. I do have friends who I trust enough and who trust me enough that if I do say something or do something, without realizing it, without thinking, that is a little bit out of line or that indicates that I have a blind spot or there's something or a bias that I'm not aware of, that they are willing to tackle me and say, whoa, hey, ho, maybe you haven't considered X, Y, and Z. And and they have helped me a great deal over the years. And yes, and a lot of them are people of color or members of the LGBTQ community of one stripe or another who are nice enough to me and care enough about me and also respect me enough to let me know when something like that is a concern of theirs. And I love and respect them enough to take it seriously when they say something like that to me and say, oh, I need to have another look at this. I need to change this. I need to reconsider this. I need to listen to what they're saying. That's a big part of it. And as to why are other white Americans not willing to do that, or why is it so difficult for them to understand? Maybe they are just not as fortunate as I am in having the kind of friends that I do. Maybe for whatever reason they didn't get that sense of the importance of empathy when they were growing up. And another big reason, I think, for me, and I'm going into sort of self-psychoanalysis here, and you take all of this with a grain of salt, but I give a lot of credit to my grandmother, to my granny, in whose house I currently sit. She passed away last year, but I've been staying in her house ever since my divorce, and I owe her a lot. I owe her and my pap, her husband, who died even longer ago. I owe them for this house that I'm living in because it was theirs. But I owe Granny for raising me. No, she didn't raise me. I had a father and a mother that raised me, but for helping to raise me in such a way that I grew up believing that other people were important. I grew up believing that it was okay, that it was good to care about other people, and that other people being happy mattered, and that it was, and other people having a chance to have a good life and to have the same opportunities that other people have. That was important, that was something that we should all care about. She put that in me from a very young age. And I'm, I think I'm definitely a better person because of that. So that's a big part of it too. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. I feel like you're giving me credit for stuff and I appreciate it. And I hope that I continue to be worthy of it. But a lot of it is stuff that was and continues to be out of my control. I can control how I react, and hopefully I don't, when someone brings up something to me that I've done or said that I shouldn't have done or said, hopefully I can react to it and respond to it in a way that is not defensive, that is open-minded and open-hearted, and that I have the capacity to see what they're talking about and to change and to reconsider. That is on me. That's my responsibility. But a lot of the other stuff, it's stuff that's out of my hands. It's parts of my life that I benefit from but did not actually earn. You know, it's another form of privilege. It's part of my personal privilege that I enjoy, not so much because of my skin color or my sexuality or my gender identity or anything like that, but because of, I mean, I do enjoy privileges as a result of all of those things too, obviously, but also just because of the friends I have and the family I have and the people that have intersected my life. You know, a lot of that, plays an important role too. So, anyway, thanks as always for the question, my friend. Dataport doll, evening, Steve. I emerged from my Ask Away hibernation to piggyback on this week's video about slash fiction. I myself have a romantic headcanon for Seven of Nine, and it's that she has a betazoid girlfriend, someone who can literally talk to her inside her head to give Seven that feeling of comfort and developmental security without any of the associated trauma with the collective. I'd be willing to gamble that in isolation, just that feeling of hearing someone else's thoughts inside your head in a very controlled way would trigger that childhood comfort response we've seen from Seven time and again. Now that I've saved the trouble of wasting space in a comment response video, as a fanfic author yourself, what opinions do you have on OCs? Not necessarily those who steal spotlight, but perhaps more logical additions to the story with no canon basis. I admit to being wary with my own due to the stigmas, but as in my example, sometimes it just fits too snugly to get rid of it. I have no problem, and for anybody who's not smart to the fanfic lingo, although I'm sure most of you are, most of you know more about the internet than I fucking do. OC is original character. It's a character in a fanfic that is not an established character. It's a character that you, as the fanfic writer, have made up on your own and inserted into the world of the story. I have no problem with OCs whatsoever. Um, I think what matters is whether or not the story is any good. Like that's my main and only concern. If I'm reading a fanfic and it's like a Batman fanfic or a Superman fanfic or a Star Trek fanfic or whatever, and there's a character in the story that is not an established character from the show or the comic or whatever, and it's a good story and it's a good character or it's a character playing an important role in the story or whatever, I couldn't care less. I and and as a fanfic writer myself, if I feel like I need to put or want to put an OC in there, I do it if I think that's what the story needs or if that's what I want or feel like I should do as the writer. And I don't give a shit what people think about it. I think it's one of the sort of ancillary benefits of me being a fanfic writer, but never having gotten all that deep in the fanfic community where I mean I do still occasionally write fanfic and I post it on fanfic.net and now I would read it on this channel if it was a good one or if it's one I wanted to share with everybody, but I've never really been a huge part of the broader sort of fanfic community, in terms of like actively participating in it and having friends in it and getting to know people. And so I mean I am aware that there is a segment of the fanfic community that does have a lot of hostility toward OCs. And I suppose if I wrote a fanfic story that had an OC in a prominent position in the story, there might be people in that camp that would grumble about it or whatever, but I honestly couldn't give less of a shit. Um, my job as a writer is to write the best story that I can. And that's the job of any writer. And if you are a fanfic writer and you decide that your story needs a character that does not have a basis in canon, is someone that you're just making up for the story, and it's what that story needs, then I say do it. I have no problem with it whatsoever. And and here's the thing: writers of the officially licensed stories do this all the time. I'm preparing a video. I was working on the script a little bit today. It won't be up until week after next at the earliest, but it's a story, or it's a video about Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers, who are my favorite Batman comics creative team. They had a run on Detective Comics in 1977 that I just love and is loved by a lot of people, and was, as it turned out, despite how short it was, it turned out to be incredibly influential. And that they started in 1977, and that run introduced Rupert Thorne, introduced Silver St. Cloud, introduced Dr. Phosphorus, who is kind of a minor Batman villain, but like he didn't exist before that. Steve Englehart created him. He didn't exist before that. Rupert Thorne, who eventually became a relatively minor but well known and important recurring antagonist in Batman the Animated Series, and is a character that a lot of people know now. Even if they're not like hardcore Batman fans, if they grew up watching Batman animated series, they remember Rupert Thorne. He did not exist before Steve Englehart made him up in the 70s, like 40 years after Batman was created. So, you know, if Steve Englehart was a fanfic writer instead of someone who had been hired by DC Comics, Rupert Thorne would be an OC. But writers of established properties do this all the time. They, superhero writers create their own villains. It is very commonplace when a new creative team takes over, especially if they've been hired for what they think is going to be a decently long run on a monthly title, that they introduce new supporting characters, they introduce new love interests, they introduce new acquaintances. And if it's a Batman comic, maybe Bruce Wayne will get a new girlfriend, or we'll be introduced to a new rival of Bruce Wayne's, or new villains, or Robin will have new friends that are introduced into the story, or whatever. Like, it happens all the time. It's regularly done and has been done over and over and over again for decades in monthly comic books. When a new creative team takes over, it's like they bring their own people in. They bring their own characters in to add to the story. And when a fanfic writer does that, as long as it creates a good story, as long as the result is good, who cares? Like, what? Who cares? Um, just got a message from Dana. She's getting ready to go on stage, or she doesn't go on stage until for about another 20 minutes, but yeah. So, um, I said we all wish her luck, by the way. Um, so anyway, um, but yeah, those OCs are completely fine with me. Um, and speaking of whom, here's Dana's question for Ask Away. Dana, who has no clever nickname. Correction, Dana, who needs no clever nickname. While you link your videos on Facebook and post updates and share things, you're even more active/involved on Twitter. Why? That's a really good question. I'm not really sure. I know that I have been more active on Twitter in the last couple of years than I have been on Facebook, and I'm not really sure why, to be honest. Maybe it's because I have a larger following on Twitter. I have, because I don't have a page on Facebook. I just have my personal Facebook profile, and I have close to the 5,000 friends limit on Facebook. But on Twitter, I have like over 12,000 followers. So maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe it's just as mercenary as that. I'm more active on Twitter, or at least I'm active on Twitter in more of a broadcasty kind of way. Like, if I have something to say that I don't feel like making a video about, but I want to write something, and I intend to sort of put it out there to the masses, I'm more likely to do that on Twitter than I am on Facebook, or at least I'm more likely to do it first on Twitter, and then if I think it's worth it, I might copy it and make it a Facebook post as well. But I don't do that all the time. I'm more likely to do it on Twitter because I just have a broader audience to start with on Twitter. There's more of a chance that people will see it and share it and think it's worth showing someone else. And so maybe that's it. Maybe it's as simple as that. But honestly, and until you pointed this out to me, because Dana and I talked about this in private a little bit earlier today, and until this was pointed out to me, I didn't even really think about it. But now that I think about it, it's completely true that I am way more active on Twitter than I am on Facebook. I'm not, again, like, maybe it's just that I've got a larger following there. Maybe that's it, but I don't really know. But it's definitely become the case. Joe McClory, is there a personality trait that you feel that you need to work on improving? Do you think those closest to you would agree with that, or would they pick another trait? I think the trait that I have to work on the most is my tendency toward self centeredness, or maybe excessive self involvement. There are now, I have gotten better about it. I have gotten to the point where um, I will remember to ask other people about their day. I will remember to ask other people about themselves. I've gotten a lot better at noticing where maybe someone in a conversation is leaving me an opening to prompt them to tell me something about themselves or tell me something about their day. And um and I'm happy to do that. And I mean, I like doing that. I like knowing. I mean, if I have someone who's a close friend or someone I care about, someone I love, I want to know about their day. I want to know about how they're feeling or what they're thinking about something. It's not like a chore for me to do that, but for whatever reason, it often has not occurred to me naturally to do that. And I think that's just it's a mark of self-centeredness. And that's something that I have tried to work on and that I have gotten a lot better at and am getting better at, I think, continuously in my life. That you know sort of tearing down that almost unconscious assumption that that other people want to hear about me, and they don't want to tell me about themselves. And it can go too far the other way too. So I think you need that. There needs to be a balance. There needs to be an exchange where someone says, someone asks me about what I'm doing, and then I ask them about what they're doing, and there's like a mutual thing. It's not just all one-sided. But I mean, within my own head, I am aware that sometimes I am not as solicitous of other people's thoughts and feelings and, how was your day, et cetera, that I should be. So that's something that I have worked on improving and still, I think, need to improve on. But that would be the thing I would think of. As for what do I think those closest to me would think the trait is, I don't know. Who fucking cares what they think? Steven Sutton, fashionably 2 weeks late, but I thought I'd weigh in on the speaking Klingon exchange from the last Ask Away. Jason Harding's question, I believe. I believe you're right. Steve, you have good company in the arm's length approach you take to the language. I refer you to my favorite documentary series, Planet Word, hosted by Stephen Fry. It's a masterful series on language, and he devotes a segment on one of the episodes to constructed languages, conlangs. He meets a Klingon speaking acting troupe in America and even joins them for a cameo in an Amdram production of Hamlet. It was an absolute joy to watch a clip of Stephen Fry in full Klingon makeup and regalia shouting his best guttural Klingon lines before coughing and politely muttering, "That really hurts," actually, if you're curious. And then there's the YouTube link to it. I didn't watch that, but that does sound funny. I mean, like I said, like I believe I said in the answer to that question, if learning to speak Klingon or learning to speak, what is it, Dothraki, the fucking made up language they did for Game of Thrones, or learning, or Esperanto, the sort of the mother tongue of all, not the mother tongue literally, but you know what I mean, like the most famous and most widely spread artificial language or constructed language, Esperanto. If that gives you pleasure, if that makes your life better, if you're a Star Trek fan and learning to speak Klingon helps you to enjoy Star Trek more, or makes you feel more a part of it, or makes it feel more a part of you, like, God damn it, I would never, ever, ever want to take any of that away from you. I would never begrudge you that for a second. And like I said, I know lots of people who are exactly that, who do just that, who can speak Klingon and have conversations in Klingon and absolutely love it, and they have a great time doing it, and it definitely improves their lives and adds to their enjoyment of Star Trek and their enjoyment of life in general, and good for them. But yeah, it's definitely not my thing. It's definitely not my thing. But so I suspect that it was not that it was not a lot of people's things, but I'm good to know that I am not the only one. So thank you for thank you for reassuring me about that. Relic 5000, greetings. So a few months ago, I came out as asexual, ace. Since then, I've been scouring the Star Trek franchise looking for asexual characters with no luck. Data comes close, as does Isaac in the Orville, but they aren't great. The problem is that they are both emotionless robots. This is a common misconception about aces. Representation matters, and Star Trek has done a pretty good job of it over the years, but it still has far to go. I just hope an ace character shows up soon in Star Trek. How do you think Star Trek has been doing with representation? Do you think there are any ace characters in Star Trek? I um I think Star Trek is doing okay as far as representation. I think it still could and should do a lot better, but it has definitely improved over the last few years. I think the current crop of shows have upped the representation in a way that the next gen era didn't really. I mean, the next gen era continued with trying to cast in terms of racial diversity and gender diversity. They did a decent job of continuing to create racially diverse casts and have men and women represented, not they never equally, but have at least not have a completely lopsided male dominated cast. Like they did good with that, and they improved on that on the original series with that, I think. But in terms of representation of different gender identities, of different sexual orientations, I don't think they did very well at all. And with the Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Lower Decks, soon to be Strange New Worlds, and Prodigy generation, sort of the Paramount Plus generation of Star Trek, I think they have been doing a much better job. Could they still do an even better job? Absolutely. And I hope that they will. And I think the people that are involved in making those shows, at least some people involved in making those shows, are aware of that and care about that and would be open to continuing to address that. If, for instance, having an asexual character. I can't really think again, as someone who is not ace myself and have not really thought about it in those terms, I'm not necessarily the best person to ask, but I can't think of any Star Trek character off the top of my head, at least not any sort of major established character that I would assume was ace. But maybe there are people in the audience or even people watching this now who have suggestions, who would say, "Oh no, that one definitely reads as ace to me." I don't know. I can't think of anybody. Even Data doesn't really read as ace to me, because we've not only have we seen him have relations, sexual and romantic relations with people, but I mean, he does seem interested in it. He doesn't do it very often, but it seems like something that he is, that he's not only willing, but kind of in certain circumstances, kind of eager to pursue. So I don't even know if Data would count, but no, I can't really think um, of someone that strikes me as ace. So that kind of representation, I think, is something that does need to be added in. Because I can't really think of anybody. But and so no, and generally speaking, I think they've done a good job with representation, but they can always do better, as can pretty much everything else. And finally, last question from Angus, who says, yet again in the UK, we have a senior politician seemingly playing away from home and being told not to worry by our prime minister, who is, of course, an expert that. So what do you expect from a Starfleet officer such as can't keep it in his pants, Riker? Well, let's be fair. Now, he's talking about, I can't think of his name right now, but another British politician who is found to be unfaithful to his spouse, right? That's what we're talking about. And to be fair to Riker, I think he was perfectly capable of keeping it in his pants. I just think he didn't have to very often. And if you want to take it out of your pants and you have the opportunity, you can find willing partners to take it out with. Why not go for it? So I feel like that was Riker's attitude. But we don't really ever see evidence of him being an unfaithful partner. I can imagine Riker being the kind of person who would be open to a polyamorous relationship. We've never seen that on screen, but that doesn't strike me as being something that was completely against his character. That wouldn't surprise me. So, I mean, I can see him doing something like that, but polyamory is not infidelity. Polyamory, everybody knows where everybody stands. I have never seen anything from Riker established on screen that led me to believe that he was the the kind of partner who would be given to sort of cavalier infidelity. Like I don't think he would um I don't think he would cheat on his wife or his monogamous girlfriend or partner, whoever they may be. And I think if he did do that, he would feel bad about it. Like he wouldn't feel justified or entitled in that way. So I don't really think it's fair to say to equate, can't keep it in his pants Riker to politicians who cheat on their wives or whatever. Because I think Riker, from what we've seen of Riker, I think he was a more ethical um, partner than that. And if he did have a moment of ethical failure and he did cheat on a partner, he would at least feel bad about it. He wouldn't be like, he's not that much of a hedonist that he just, he throws all morals and ethics out the window. But, that's just my take on him. And maybe I'm a little biased because, as I've said before, he is one of my favorite characters in the franchise. So there you go. Anyway, that's it for the pre-submitted patron questions. Thanks to all my patrons and members for pre-submitting your questions. And now let us turn to the live chat and see what everybody is talking about in the live chat. So let me check the window here, and I think I need to there it is. There's the live chat. Hi everybody. Oh, and the first thing I see from Sarah Scott, she says Seven did find romance with Raffi, though. Yes, she did. Apparently, in the closing seconds of the season. Deralta Trekkie asks, why wasn't there a stream on Wednesday? Oh, we mentioned that, and for anybody, I guess who missed that, there was no stream on Wednesday because all this week Dana had Tech Week for her play, so she couldn't make it. So we didn't do a stream this week. We will be doing one next week. Next week, we will be watching the second half of Serenity. And we'll also be doing Read Away as scheduled because they don't have a play. Dana's play is running this weekend and weekend after next. They're not running on 4th of July weekend. So this week was Tech Week. So Dana was unavailable, so we didn't do it on Wednesday. So we announced that on last Wednesday and also on Friday, but for anybody who missed it, sorry about that. Radical Bacon asks, how's Ashley? If you can share, I will share just very generally that Ashley is doing good. Ashley is doing very well as far as I can tell. We just saw each other briefly a couple of days ago and she's doing good. So yeah, she's doing good. Some Random Geek, how would you feel if I say fuck Biden? I mean, you can go ahead and say it. Like, depending on your reasons for it, I will, depending on your reasoning behind it, I may disagree. But I mean, I'm not going to be like, hey, I think Biden overall, there are things that I really, really wish Biden was doing a better job at that I think things that I think he could make a difference on, that he hasn't done as much as I would like. So, in that sense, I'm with you, but there are also, but overall, in general, I think Biden is doing a not terrible job. So I am not a fuck Biden person, but I can see why people might have that feeling. 225 AD says, is it weird to not want there to be an afterlife? Like, I think eternal life, no matter how pleasurable, would get intolerably boring eventually. No, I know people who feel that way. I don't think that's unusual. I can't imagine feeling that way myself. But I can understand why some people might feel that way for reasons you described there. Super chat from John Burns, who says, idea for having cops be more like lawyers. Are you not aware of lawyers being paid by Britney Spears to prevent her human rights? Well, in this case, we will be talking about cops would not be free. Cops would not be lawyers in the sense that a lot of lawyers are freelance. We would be talking more like cops, I guess, in terms of, I mean, even freelance lawyers are still, they still have a law license. They're still accountable to some kind of oversight agency that can take away their ability to legally practice law. So I mean, nobody's saying make cops more like lawyers in the sense of let police just roam the streets willy nilly and practice, law enforcement, like be hired out by people to no, I feel like that's a twisting of the proposal. I don't think that was suggested at all in the question. And obviously I would not be in favor of that, like, at all. More like in the sense of cops. Maybe a good metaphor would be like public defenders. You know, like they're not free agents. They are still agents of the government, but they would be susceptible to the same level of regulation and oversight as lawyers are. I think that's the main point of that proposal. Um, Scott says, "Do you have more faith of the heart or strength of the soul?" I think I probably have more faith of the heart. Um, and another super chat from John Burns, who apparently has more super chats above. Good to see. I'm glad to see you have you have acknowledged, you have been following my admonition to please don't send super chats until I get to the live chat. But anyway, okay, I only see one other super chat from you. So if there's others that I've missed, I don't know why Google is not showing me them. But the only other one of yours that I see, John, is this one that says my favorite superhero is Mr. Canoehead, struck by lightning while portaging. He was unable to return to selling insurance, so now he fights crime. That is a comic book I would read. That is definitely a comic book I would read. But if you have super chats before that, I am not seeing them. Okay, here's one from further up. I'm scrolling up to see if I can find them. I wonder why Google is not showing them to me on the viewer activity page. Here's one from John that says Ted Nolan is. This is why I ask you please not to send super chats until I'm paying attention to the live chat. But anyway, Ted Nolan is a former coach of the year in the NHL. He was asked what Indigenous Day meant to him, and residential schools came up. When he asked his mom why he never went to a residential school, she pointed to the shotgun in their home. Do you support a parent protecting his child in this way? I'm not sure. Is Ted Nolan is Ted Nolan an Indigenous person himself? I guess from the context of the question, I would assume that Ted Nolan is an Indigenous person, and the shotgun was to stop the government from taking him to a residential school. I mean, in that circumstance, I would support it. Yeah, because apparently those residential schools are fucking death camps. So I mean, if I were a parent and I knew about this and I knew that my kid could be taken to a school where there were like unmarked graveyards in the back of it from all the students that had died there, I mean, I would make every effort to protect my kid from going to that situation. So I mean, in that circumstance, I suppose, yeah, I would support that. Here's another one from John from earlier on. While there are still kids in cages, how wise was Kamala Harris when she told groups of people in Guatemala not to go to the United States? I mean, she's wise in terms of like practically speaking. But I still think, as I said before, I think the long-term goal should be to find ways to let more people in. I mean, if you feel like it's the most responsible thing for now to say, please don't come, we don't have the facilities ready to handle the intake, I think that's fine. But the long-term goal should be getting the facilities ready so that more people who need to come can come, you know? Another one from John. By the way, John, as always, thank you for the super chats. I really appreciate it. Another one from earlier from John, who says, your Spurk fan fiction made me think of Wosha, but from a we're different, similar, and can work together because of our differences from others and work because of our upbringing. Not sexual, but a supportive working. I'm not sure what Wosha is. I guess would that be Worf and Tasha, maybe? Wosha? I'm not sure. I'm not I'm not positive what Woshi is referring to, but But I would guess it's Worf and Tasha. And yeah, that makes sense. If that's what you're referring to, that does make sense. That you can work together because of your differences from others and because of your upbringing. It's not sexual, but it's yeah, so you're sort of shipping them in terms of being friendship, not in terms of like a romantic relationship, which is kind of like how they were depicted on the show. And that's the last super chat of yours that I saw, John. So thank you very much. Yeah, okay, Worf and Tasha. Yeah, cool. I was right. Um, do, do, do. Queer Pro Black asks, "Are you very involved in Maryland politics?" Not really. I feel like maybe I should be, especially in my local area because it is so deeply conservative. Maybe I could make a difference if I was more active in local politics, but I don't know if I have the energy for that, and I don't know if I'm necessarily very well suited to that. But no, I'm not. I mean, I'm involved. I keep up on it, like I follow it, but I'm not like personally involved. This is a good one from some random geek. Would Batman perform oral sex on Catwoman? Um, I would like to say yes because I think that's a good thing to do. Like I think if you are I mean, I just think it's I don't have a problem with it myself, and I would like to think that Batman would not have a problem with it, but it depends on how you're writing Batman. It really does. I mean, there are ways to write Batman where he would be a fairly uptight, repressed dude, sexually speaking, and so in that case, he probably wouldn't. So it depends on how you're writing Batman. I'll tell you this though. In the '70s, and there's a joke in the script I'm writing about the Englehart Rogers Batman. But I'll tell you this: in the '70s, he definitely did. I'll leave it at that. In the '70s, he definitely did. Deralta Trekkie says, so apparently yesterday there was this thing about the U.S. opening their files concerning UFOs or UAPs as they're called now. Did you ever see one? I have never seen one myself. No, I have never seen one. T Reed True, what's your favorite, if you have to pick one, DS9 episode and why? It's The Visitor, and it's not only my favorite DS9 episode, it's my favorite episode of any Star Trek show ever, and it's because of the beautiful performance by Tony Todd as the elder Jake. It's because of the way it explores the unbreakable bond of love, of father and son between Ben and Jake. It's just a beautiful, sad, heartbreaking story, told in a way that is very atypical for Star Trek. It's a very sort of off-model show. It's not really an adventure story. There isn't a villain. It's a character study, and it's told in a way that really only a sci-fi story can do. And it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. I think it's the finest hour of Deep Space Nine, and I think it's the finest hour Star Trek has ever produced. So The Visitor is definitely my favorite DS9 episode. Draw to Trekkie, I know I have not seen Justice Society World War II. I saw the trailer for it, but I didn't even realize it was out yet, so I haven't watched it. If it's, I guess, is it on HBO Max with the rest of the direct-to-video animated stuff? If it is, I might check it out this weekend if I remember, but no, I haven't watched it yet. 255 AD says Thomas made the episode because he thought the article would drive some atheists even harder into the right. Thoughts on that? Well, I mean, if that's what he thought and that's why he made the episode, then I guess I can't fault him for that, but I don't really see why he would think that. I mean, my take on it is just not that. I mean, I don't really think it's that controversial to say that, that the new atheist movement has, if not merged with the far right, has always had some very, very far right ideas at the top of it, especially when it comes to attitudes toward Islam and Muslim people. That has always been a part of the new atheist movement, thanks in large part to the likes of Sam Harris, and also, to be fair, to Christopher Hitchens, who did more than his share to fan the flames of Islamophobia, although he was at least a lot more nuanced about it while he was alive than Sam Harris was. But he still did it, and he still said and did things that I think contributed to a lot of harmful attitudes toward Muslims in the atheist community. So, I mean, that's always been a part of the movement, and I don't think it's controversial to say that it has at least been co-opted by a lot of far right philosophies and far right actors. Um, I don't think that's that controversial of a statement, and it's certainly not one that I feel is worth taking time to argue about. Nor is the overall shitty state of the atheist community. But I mean, if Thomas honestly believed that he was that in responding to that, he was stopping people from moving even further to the right, like I can't fault him for that, but I just don't see how you get there. I don't. That was definitely not my reaction when I read that article. I did not read that article in Salon by Phil Torres and think, oh no, this is going to drive more people to the right. Like that was not my reaction. Um, Another super chat from Kirok 2011 who says, "Hey Steve, I saw in one of your videos you mentioned NYPD Blue. I would love to see some videos on the show. I personally thought the show was great. Oh, so did I. One of my favorite shows ever. I have notes that I swear I will get to this at some point. I have no idea when or how I will fit it into my schedule. But I did a rewatch of NYPD Blue from start to finish. It's almost 2 years ago now, and I sat down after I was done and I plotted out a 12 video series about NYPD Blue and examining various aspects of the show. And I still really, really want to do that. So I'm going to do that at some point. I'm going to do not just a video, but a whole series of videos about NYPD Blue. I have no idea when. I don't want to give anybody any like particular dates or create any kind of expectations, but I do definitely want to make video essays about NYPD Blue because I think it was a great show. I'm right there with you, and I have specific ideas about videos I want to make and a whole series I want to make, but I just need to find time to actually do it. And a super chat from Mike Garcia for $4.99. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate that. Deralta Trekkie, wasn't Rupert Thorne the dude who annoyed Harvey that much that he turned into Two-Face? Yes, in the animated series, yes. Not in the comics. The Thorne in the comics was different, but yes, in the animated series, Rupert Thorne was the antagonist who sort of drove Harvey Dent to become Two-Face. Yes, absolutely. Scott says, is it possible that Steve, the patron who asked you that question you keep getting and hate answering, is your mirror universe counterpart fucking with you? That was my assumption as well. I think that's probably it. Mr. System 96 asks, what's your least favorite episode of any Star Trek series? That's tough. Probably Code of Honor from TNG, the super racist first season TNG episode. That's just, not only is it morally repugnant because of the racism, but it's just a lousy episode. So if I had to pick like my least favorite episode of all of the shows, it would probably be Code of Honor. And Dorota Trekkie asks, what is your most favorite starship? It doesn't need to be from Star Trek. Well, thank you, but you know it's going to be from Star Trek. My favorite ship, it's either the Defiant or the refit Enterprise from the movies, like the refit Enterprise, and then also the Enterprise A, which was basically the same ship. Well, not side, the same model, same design. One of those. It's hard to pick. I really like the disco version of the Enterprise as well, the Discovery and soon to be the Strange New Worlds version of the Enterprise as well. I think that's and that's my favorite interior set. That's my favorite bridge set, is the Discovery version of the Enterprise bridge. And that version of the ship is way up on my list. I love that design. It looks so cool. But yeah, either the Defiant or the movie version of the classic Enterprise. 255 AD, something you said earlier. You think Superman shouldn't view his job as a burden? Generally speaking, yes. I'm fine with doing stories every now and then about, like, you know, the the demands of being Superman getting to him. Like I'm okay with that. But in general, I don't think he should be like a put upon I think he should view it as an obligation. He should view it as a duty. He should view it as, but it should be something he wants to do. It should be something he thinks is important to him. Not something that, oh, I guess I have to go be Superman now. Like it shouldn't come across like that. It should come across as it's who he is. It's what he does, because it's important to him. It gives his life purpose and meaning. Uh, that's how I see the character. And that's how I think the character works the best, not grim and glum and, oh God, I hear somebody screaming, gotta go save somebody. Like that's how the Henry Cavill version comes across to me a lot of the time. I just don't dig it. Super chat from Stephen Fenn. Oh, Ace Pride. Thanks for answering my question so eloquently. You're very good. Well, thank you very much for saying that. And thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Some random geek with a good point. If saying new atheism has merged with the far right moves you to the right, you were already there to begin with. Yeah, I don't really get that concern of I need to respond to this because otherwise it might move more people to the right. Like if that's honestly what he thought, I can't fault him, but that's not what I thought at all. That's not what I thought at all when I read that. Super chat from John Burns, who says, from Dark Matter, Android, finally learning about my origin has caused me to reconsider who I am, who and what I am. I learned I'm special too, in a good way. That sounds nice. Kirak, did you guess? Did you guess what my least favorite episode was going to be? It's a good guess. It's a good guess. Ethan Kennan, sorry. Do you plan on doing a video on Neelix? Not specifically right now, but I'll tell you what, I will add that to my list of possible topics. I could see doing a video on Neelix at some point. There are Neelix related things that I could do videos about for sure. So I will add that. Actually, you know what? I will do that right the fuck now. I will add it to my potential topics list because I don't want to forget about it because sometimes that happens. People say, oh, you should make a video about blah, 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 blah. And I'll say, oh, what a great idea. And then I'll forget about it. So I'm going to put that. I keep a doc of potential future Trek Actually topics. So I will put something about Neelix on there. And I will put in parentheses that it was suggested by Ethan Kennan. So I know who to shout out if I ever get to make that video. I'll say this is something that was inspired by Ethan Kennan. So there you go. Again, no idea when or what that's going to be, but it is on the list now. So thank you for the suggestion. Geralta Trekkie, who has just watched or is currently watching the Snyder Cut of Justice League, by the way, asks, gotta say, I don't like the from the Justice League, the Wonder Woman, the chant that accompanies Wonder Woman every time she does anything in the movie. And nor the rock version both hurt my head. What would have been a better Wonder Woman theme? I mean, the Wonder Woman song is good. Like you mean like from the Linda Carter show? Dun, 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 Wonder Woman, like something like that. The theme that they attach to her in the movie, like that chant theme, that thing. The music cue in and of itself is not bad. It's just ridiculously overused. If they used it once or twice, maybe it would have been fine. But it's just they use it. There's not much to it. Like it's not presented as a musical phrase that you can sort of go back to and grow and change and improvise on. It's not part of like an established orchestral piece that where there's a pattern and you look forward to it coming back. It's just this one music cue that they keep using over and over and over and over again, and to the point of absurdity. So, I mean, I think that's the problem with it. Not that there's anything wrong with the cue itself. It's fine. It's just, God damn it. You really like that, don't you, Zach? Another super chat from Kirak 2011 says, Steve, referring to my earlier question about the comparison about the war being rated. This is going to be a two-part, but Children of Time was so close Waiting for the conclusion. Here it is. The time was close to the non-aggression pact that the Dominion had with Bajor. In short, Cisco was their emissary. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Oh, I see. I think I see what you mean. Like Cisco being the emissary of the prophets, but also being a partisan in the war. Wasn't that a kind of, I never really thought about that, but I suppose I can see that. And like maybe it would have been inappropriate for the prophets to take sides as a result of that, I guess. But yeah, I didn't really think about that. 255 AD says Eli responded to the article and said people are going to see new atheists and assume it means anyone who's recently become an atheist, not the Four Horsemen. Maybe some people will think that, but I think context is important. Like if you're capitalizing capital N, capital A, new atheist, and you're talking about it in terms of the new atheist movement, the new atheist community, new atheism, I think it's less likely that people will come to that conclusion. I mean, it never hurts to stick your head up out of the, out of your bubble and consider that maybe people who aren't as in tune to the issues as you are will see it differently than you do. I mean, I think it's wise to consider that. And maybe some people who do hear the phrase new atheists will assume it's people who just became atheists. But I think in the context that I usually see that term used and I usually see it being discussed, I don't imagine most people would think that. But again, I could be wrong. Super chat from John Burgess says, I posted the rest of the dialogue of a same scene in the Dark Matter episode. It touches on autonomy, something all peoples GLBTQQ are concerned of. Yeah, I think I saw that further back. But like I said, I know you've recommended it before and a couple of other people have recommended it to me, but I've never watched Dark Matter. Hey, there's Opinionville. There's my buddy Jason. Desert Island, you are stuck there with one other person. Who is it and how long would it be before you ate them? Oh, but I could take this in such a filthy direction. But I'm not going to. Although if I say the person I'm thinking of, the answer is probably that night. But no, one other person, who is it and how long would it be before I ate them? Well, it would be you, buddy. We'll be stuck on the desert island together. And I mean, if we can't find food, unfortunately, I mean, I don't want it to be this way. I don't want this to be our fate, but if this is how it has to be, if we can't find food on the island, then as soon as you die, I'm eating you. Sorry. I mean, and I would expect no less from you. You know, if I'm the first to go, bon appetit, right? I mean, come on. You got to do what you got to do. I don't judge those Donner Party people. I don't judge those soccer players. You got to do what you got to do, right? Come on. Derogatory Trekkie says, so I bought the Snyder Cut, watched the first 25 minutes, and yeah, Wonder Woman downright killed 2 terrorist assholes. Why do people watch this and say she's a hero? Because people, I think, the people who enjoyed that scene, I think they just enjoy the carnage. They like seeing superheroes kill people, Radical Bacon says, I love the 7/4 Wonder Woman theme, but I have years of music theory, so that definitely influences it. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, the 7/4 Wonder Woman theme. Scott says, what's the best line from the Masters of the Universe movie, and why is it, I dare anything, I am Skeletor? That's a good one. I also like, and I think me and Jason brought this out in our review of that movie on late seating, when near the end of the movie, when Skeletor says to He-Man, "Then let this be our final battle," and at least as far as the movie is concerned, it's their first battle. So that's a good line. Um, And Deralta Trekkie asks, "What's your favorite episode of The Golden Girls, and why is it the one where Dorothy and Rose see the UFO?" I remember that one. I like that one. I also like the one where, and I forget exactly because it's been a long time since I've seen it, but through some plot contrivance, they all end up having to share a bed. They're all like crammed into one bed together, and Rose keeps keeping everybody awake by saying her prayers, and the prayers just go on and on and on, and eventually Dorothy interrupts Rose, pretending to be God, and says, "Rose, thanks for the lovely prayer. Now shut up and get into bed." That just cracks me up every time. Um, Oh right, okay. 7/4 is the time of it. I see. 7/4 is the time of the. It's the Hans Zimmer Wonder Woman theme, but it's a 7/4. Okay, yeah. See, I am not well versed in musical theory, so I didn't automatically assume that's what you were talking about. I think that's a good. Yeah, I think that's a good theme. Yeah. Um, Dorothy Trekkie asks, who is your favorite villain? Dukat, Khan, Kashyyyk, or Raymond Redigan? I think Raymond Redigan is from The Blacklist, right? I've never watched that, so I can't say that. Of those listed, I would say Dukat. Um, yes, Gerald Drecki. That is the He-Man movie with Tom Paris. Absolutely, Robert Duncan McNeil is in the Masters of the Universe movie for sure, for sure. Kirok, did you guess again? Kirok 2011. You're trying to guess my answers to these questions. Yeah, and Ethan. Yeah, Ethan Kennan. Yes, thank you. I thought that was right. Kennan, not Keenan. Yeah, I'll try to. I'll. I think I said it Keenan the first time because I was skimming the chat and I just misread it. I just automatically thought it was Keenan, and then I saw it was Kennan, and I okay. Um, 255 AD. Now this is interesting. You said the other thing Eli said was that a mainstream publication would be loath to say Christianity merged with the far right, even though it's way more defensible. That I can say I definitively disagree with. I think it's fair to say, and the reason is because Christianity is a much larger umbrella than atheism, right? Um, if someone were to say, and especially the new atheism, so if someone were to say Christianity, and that's as specific as they got, if they said Christianity merged with the far right, I completely disagree. I think that's a totally unfair thing to say. If you want to say that evangelical Christianity or conservative Christianity or fundamentalist Christianity merged with the far right or has become a tool of the far right or something like that, I will definitely go with you there. But to just say Christianity writ large has merged with the far right, I disagree with that completely. I don't think that's fair at all. But, and uh, the article that we're talking about, the Salon article, specifically said new atheism. And it's talking about like the four horsemen, the Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins led or inspired movement, the new atheist movement, which is much more specific than Christianity, and is even more specific than atheism in general. So no, I disagree with that. I mean, unless Eli was also specifically referring to particular sects or particular variations of Christianity, that I can definitely get behind. But Christianity in general being co-opted or being merged with the far right, no, that's not true at all. New atheism being merged with the far right, I mean, I guess the only way I would disagree with it would be, as I said earlier, if you want to argue about whether or not merged is the right way to describe that, um, I guess you can do that. But again, that's not an argument I'm remotely interested in having. Like I don't really care about it that much. The main point to me is that the new atheist movement, the especially the leaders of new atheism like Dawkins and Harris, etc., suck. And regardless of what other political opinions they may hold to, a lot of what they say is at least friendly to or compatible with far right politics, and in some cases is explicitly far right, or is indistinguishable from what you would hear from a far right politician, especially their views on Muslims and trans people and feminists and a whole laundry list of other things. Oh, and just got a new channel member. Stephen Fenn just became a member. Thank you very much, my friend. I really appreciate that. Another super chat from Kirak 2011 says, my last NYPD comment tonight, but I noticed you love the Simone era, which I agree, but I love the Sipowicz arc during the first season. And one of my, and then it's to be continued. Oh boy, I can't wait for the second part. And by the way, John Burns with another super chat that says, that group of atheists, the Four Horsemen? Yes. Yeah, I guess because I'm fortunate because I'm a wrestling fan, I still, when I hear the term Four Horsemen, I still automatically associate it with the wrestling group. So when someone says Four Horsemen to me, unless it's like specifically in the context of talking about atheism stuff, when I hear Four Horsemen, I automatically think of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, and Tully Blanchard. Managed, of course, by James J. Dillon. That's the first place that my head goes to when I hear Four Horsemen. But yes, they're also a group of prominent atheists. Here's the second part of Correct 2011 Super Chat. One of my favorite interview sequences takes place in Tempest of a Sea Cup. Hands down, Kelly was amazing. Anyways, thoughts? Yeah, the first season was good. The first season of NYPD Blue was good, and you definitely had a character arc for Sipowicz. Sipowicz was an absolute mess when the show began, and he remained a mess in varying degrees for many years. But that first season, especially, he was like completely a mess and was an even more overtly terrible person than he was for a lot of the rest of the show. I think, yeah. So the first season was good. It was a good show in the first season. It was a very strong first season. And David Caruso as Kelly, I thought was terrific. And of course, Dennis Franz as Sipowicz was fantastic. He was good for the entire run of the show. But yeah, the Simone years, I think, are the best years. The Jimmy Smits years are my favorites. That was when I thought the show, during my rewatch relatively recently, those were the best years of the show, I thought then. And when the show was originally on and I was watching it when it was being broadcast, those were the years that I really fell in love with the show, and it became like a show that I had to see, for sure. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to underrate the first season at all, because it was especially for a first season, it was a really strong first season. 255 AD says, I'd have to go back and listen to the podcast, but I think Eli said evangelicals in that particular instance. Well, and that is more reasonable to say than Christianity. But again, but then the argument to me becomes, are people really reluctant to say that? Like, is it really controversial to point? I mean, maybe there aren't people in the media saying it very often, but I don't think it's all that controversial to say that evangelical Christianity in the United States specifically is either, you could say, merged or is an instrument of, or is closely associated with the far right. Like, if Eli is trying to say that, like, well, the media would never say that, but they would say this about atheism, I disagree with that. I don't think that would be a controversial thing at all. And it's not like people are saying it all that much about new atheism. It's one article, but I think it's true, and again, I don't get the impulse to defend it like that. That's my main point of departure. I just don't get why people are feeling like, oh, it's not far right, even especially people who acknowledge the shittiness of it. but still feel like, oh, but it's not far right. It's not far right. Get that part right. Like, really? But oh, suddenly, Steve, that's a good point. White evangelicals. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's a good point. Um, Scott says, asks best wrestling tag team. Ooh. If you're asking, what's the best wrestling tag team right now? I would say probably FTR are my favorites. I really, really, I mean, they've broken up. It's been, has it been almost a year? No, not yet, but it's been a lot. But when they were the champions in AEW, I really, really loved Hangman and Omega. I thought Hangman and Omega were a fantastic team. And that's the most I have liked Kenny Omega as a character and as an in-ring worker since AEW started. I thought that to me, that's my favorite sort of phase of Kenny Omega's AEW career by far, was his tag team with Hangman. I thought they were a great team together. But of the teams currently active, I would probably say FTR is my favorite. Um, Santana and Ortiz are really good too. Who's another really good team? And I would have said, until recently, I would have said SCU, but they're split up now, or I guess Christopher Daniels is retiring, so I can't really say them right now. Um, but in terms of all time, like in all of history, who are my favorite? Who do I think is my? I really love the Rockers. Um, I really love the Midnight Express. I think it would probably be one of those two. Probably, and I would probably give the edge to the Rockers. I just loved the Rockers when I was a kid. They were my favorite tag team. Heart Foundation were great too. So it's tough to pick. Like, it's tough to pick. Arn and Tully. Oh man, Arn and Tully, such a great team. Um, but yeah, those are some possibilities. Super chat from John Burns. Thank you once again, my friend. Says Roddy Piper thought having half body black was a good idea for the ring. Andre threw out the mixture to take it off his body. He goes through customs as half black. Canada didn't want him, and it wasn't so damn funny. Oh, I agree with you about that. Piper doing the half black thing was horrible, and I do not. And they edited that stuff out of when they put WrestleMania 6 on Peacock. They cut all that stuff out. Like, that's not even there anymore. And it was horrible at the time, and it's even worse with modern eyes looking back at it. It was terrible. It was terrible. It never should have been allowed. It was awful. And it serves Piper right, because what you're referring to there is he painted half his body black for a match against a black guy, and then the black paint couldn't come off. Like, he had to go through the airport, and it wasn't as bad as it was when he had himself painted up, but it stained him. The paint, like, it visibly darkened his skin where the paint was, even after he took it off, and it didn't go away for a couple of days, I think. So he had to go through the airport like that, and it serves him right. I mean, I love Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper was one of my favorite wrestlers, but that was completely unacceptable. It was, you're right. It wasn't so damn funny at all. And serves him right for having to go through the airport like that. It was a dumb idea, and it was a shitty racist thing to do. And I don't really have pity for him at all. Yeah, John Burns is a Heart Foundation fan. Damn right. Yeah, Heart Foundation was a great team. Heart Foundation was a great team. Tom Gun 3D, does Kirk versus Gorn count as a wrestling match? Yeah, and unfortunately, it has that shitty run-in finish where the Metrons come in and throw the match out right when Kirk was about to win. Actually, no, that's not Kirk. What was going to happen was speaking of Roddy Piper, it was like Roddy Piper versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8, where Piper had the ring bell and he was about to crack Bret over the skull with the ring bell, and then he had the pang of conscience and he put it down, which eventually allowed Bret to beat him and win back the Intercontinental title. That's what was going to happen. Kirk had the Gorn. He was ready to drop the boulder on him, and then he stopped himself. He said, no, I can't do it. No, it wasn't the boulder. It was the thing. He was going to stab him with the sharp rock. But anyway, he was like, no, I can't do it, which is the morally right thing to do, right? To not kill your fallen opponent. Like, Kirk was morally correct. But if the Metron hadn't interfered, then the Gorn would have woken up and killed him. So, we were cheated out of a clean finish to the match. But yes, I think it definitely counts as a wrestling match. A couple more questions, and I'm going to wrap this up because we're past the 2 hour mark here. Michael Day says They Live was a great movie. I say that anytime the opportunity arises, and so you should, because it was a great movie. Yeah, and John Burns, yes, the other wrestler was Bad News Allen. It was Piper versus, he was called Bad News Brown in the WWF, but yeah, it was Bad News Allen at WrestleMania. And yeah, that's why Roddy Piper painted himself half black, because he was wrestling a black man in the biggest show of the year. You look at that and you think, how did that ever make it into the show? How did Piper, like, why was there no one when Roddy Piper went up to, whether it was Vince McMahon or Pat Patterson or whoever he had to clear that with, when Roddy said, I have a great idea for my match with Bad News, I'm going to paint myself half black. Was there no one who said, no, you're not, you can't do that? Anyway, Geraldo Trekkie says, by the way, what is your favorite MacGyver episode? That is really tough. That is really tough. I think my favorite MacGyver episode is I think it's the second Murdoch episode. It's the one where MacGyver's childhood friend Mike falls off of a mountain and dies, and while MacGyver is in mourning, he retreats to a cabin in the woods, and Murdoch, his arch nemesis, returns and stalks MacGyver to this cabin in the woods and chases MacGyver and his frenemy slash kind of sort of love interest slash colleague Nicky Carpenter around the mountain, and they're just being chased around by this insane murderous Murdoch. That's probably my favorite, but there's other ones too. I mean, it's really tough to pick a favorite MacGyver episode. There's one from the first season. The one from the first season where MacGyver's at the airport, the rural airport that is being taken hostage by thieves who are looking to hijack a truck, and it's the one where MacGyver makes a torch out of a bicycle. It's probably my favorite MacGyver invention. He makes a torch out of the frame of a bicycle that cuts through the door of an armored truck. That's definitely my favorite MacGyverism. And the way he tosses it out there casually, because the bad guys are gonna put like a bomb on the outside of the door of the truck and blow it open. And MacGyver's like, oh no, and there's a guard inside, and MacGyver doesn't want him to kill the guard with this bomb. So he's like, no, don't blow up the truck. Here, I'll make a torch out of a bicycle and cut it open for you. And the bad guys are like, all right, let's see ya. And he does, because he's MacGyver. So that's a good one too. Oh, and the physics contest. Oh my God, the physics contest is so great. That's a good one too. The Physics Follies, where MacGyver goes back to his old college, and it's his old professor, and he's like a really hard ass guy, and he has his son David, who has like a drug problem because he's taking Jesse pills. like Jesse took in that episode of Saved by the Bell to help her study. He's hooked on Jesse pills, and and he builds a bomb that MacGyver and the professor then have to defuse. That's such a great episode too. Anyway, there's way too many MacGyver episodes to choose from, but the ones I've said I think are close to the top of my list. Robert Mills says, should media be allowed to edit out problematic moments? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, NBC Universal owns the rights to air WrestleMania 6. They got the rights from WWE to host their content, and they have the right to decide if they want to host all of it or some of it or whatever. And if there's parts of those shows that they consider inappropriate for their platform, I think they have every right to take it out for sure. And I don't think it's always the right thing to do. I think we should be very careful about it. But in that particular case, editing out blackface, I don't have any objection to that at all. And I mean, it's not like there's historical importance to it. You know what I mean? It's just, it's an undercard. It's a mostly forgotten undercard match on WrestleMania 6 that really is only remembered because Piper did blackface. I mean, no, I don't have a problem with them cutting that out at all. And I think, did I miss a super chat here? Let me see. Um, yeah, another one from John Burns. Thank you, my friend. Says, Bad News Allen was expecting to fight Piper again. He was told, no, you're going to fight Jake the Snake now, and he was overjoyed. I'll fight Jake. Yeah, Bad News Allen was a really interesting guy. It's a shame. He was a big star in Canada, as you probably know, John. But he was never as big of a star in the United States as I think he deserved to be. He was a great promo. He was a great talker. He was good in the ring. He was legit. Like he was a legitimate judo champion. So he could actually fight in addition to being a good professional wrestler. And yeah, he should have been a bigger star in the U.S., I think. Anyway, 255 AD, I see you've asked this a couple of times. I just want to make sure that I get to this. Even if Eli was right about that, would it just be whataboutism on his part? Yeah, I think it would. I think it would. Absolutely. Um, do, do, do. Yeah, the masked YouTuber, Bad News Brown is what he was called in the WWF, but Bad News Allen, his real, I think Allen was his first name. I think his actual name, was it Alan Kogler? Alan Kugler? Let me look that up. Bad News Allen. Alan Coage, that's it. Alan Coage was his actual name, his legal name. And he wrestled as Bad News Brown in the WWF, but in Stampede in Canada, he was Bad News Allen. That's what he's mostly referred to as. But yeah, Bad News Brown, same guy. 255 AD, you're welcome, buddy. Thanks, Steve. Now that you've answered that, I can leave. Thank you very much. All right, so now I'm going to wrap up the show. So thanks everybody for the questions. Thanks everybody for the super chats. Thanks everybody for hanging around. Don't forget the charity links that are linked in the video description and that Some Random Geek has been sharing in the chat for the last little bit. If you click that link, go to charitylinks.page and check out that Google Doc that Some Random Geek maintains for us that has links to legal defense funds and GoFundMe's and crowdfunding sites and PayPal links, and just for folks who need a helping hand, who are having trouble making ends meet and could use some extra financial help if you are able to afford to. We would really, really appreciate you doing that. And thanks as always to Some Random Geek for continuing to maintain that and to push that and to encourage us to help out people when they need it and when we can. Also, don't forget that if you want to support this channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives and becoming a patron, or by clicking the join button on the YouTube page and becoming a channel member. The benefits to both are pretty much the same. If you become a channel member or a patron at any level, you get the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away streams. And as you saw, if you've been watching this from the beginning, I answer questions that were pre-submitted by patrons and members first before I turn to the live chat. So if you want the chance to post a question ahead of time, become a patron or become a member by either clicking the join button or going to patreon.com/Steve Shives. If you become a patron or a member at $5 a month or more, and technically with members it's $4.99 a month, but roughly speaking, $5 a month. You also get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. So please consider supporting this channel if you enjoy what I do and if you can. Also, don't forget that I co-host a couple of podcasts along with the great Jason Harding and the great Dana Cole, who once again is performing right now as we speak down there in Georgia on stage performing as Miss Minchin in a production of A Little Princess. And I'm sure she's doing great, and we all wish her well and hope she has a great show and that they all have a great show. But Dana and Jason and I are all in the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that just had a new episode go up this very day. If you have not listened to the Ensign's Log, I highly recommend it. It's a really great show. We have a great time doing it, and we play low-ranking officers currently serving aboard the TNG era Starship Enterprise. But this is our fourth season. The first three seasons took place in the classic Trek era. Now we have moved on to the TNG era. and sort of moved our characters forward through the magic of time travel. And we're starting, we're still relatively at the beginning of the fourth season and still starting like a whole new fiction and a whole new adventure for the show. It's been really fun so far. And it's, of course, it's great to work with Jason and Dana and to do that show. And I'm really happy to get to do that. And also, Jason and I also co-host the movie review podcast, Late Seating, and the most recent episode of that went up last week, and that was our review of Raising Arizona. And next week we'll be doing, this weekend we're actually recording it, and it'll be up next week. It'll be our review of the classic 1970s neo-noir starring Jack Nicholson, and directed by, I don't know, somebody, Chinatown. So that'll be a good one too. So letmelistenpodcasts.com. And also there are links in the description to those shows as well that you can check it out. Please listen to my podcasts. I love my podcast. I love that Jason lets me be on the podcasts, and I think we do a great job. So anyway, that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for the questions. Scott, it's okay if you forgot to listen to the Ensign's log today because it's still there. Oh, Kirok 2011, thanks for a last second super chat. Thank you very much, my friend. Says, thank you for your time. Hope you have a great night. Well, you took the words right out of my mouth because I was about to say the same thing to you and to everybody. Thanks to everybody so much for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the questions. I hope you have a great night. I hope you have a great weekend. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.